If you're in a situation where you got rejected, dumped, shot down, or heartbroken, what you gotta understand is that she did you a favor. And I don't mean that in like a vengeful, spiteful, vindictive type of way, like, oh, you're so much better without her, she didn't deserve you, you're a king and she's some thought. Like, I'm not saying all that because number one, that's what women do, and number two, I don't know that to be the case. It could have been the case where you are better without her, where maybe she would have been bad for you, maybe she was toxic, maybe she was negative to your life. Maybe she was holding you back. Maybe it was a blessing in disguise. Or maybe that her rejecting you was better for you because now you're less distracted by someone who would have been negative in your life anyways. Maybe you would have missed some opportunity that was coming your way. Maybe you would have wasted a lot of time. Maybe she would have drained your wallet. Or maybe it was the other way around. Maybe you weren't good for her. Maybe you were dragging her down. But in both examples, depending on your perspective to the situation, she did you a favor. You see, what you gotta understand is that everything happens for a reason, and it's something you gotta understand and internalize. Like, there's a reason why it didn't work out. There's a reason why you're better off without her. There's a reason why maybe you guys are better off without each other. There's a reason why she rejected you. There's a reason why she lied and said she had a boyfriend. And the reason why she did you a favor is because now you're in a mindset where you can self-analyze, where you can self-reflect. And when you can self-reflect and self-analyze, that's when you're able to grow. That's when you can start taking steps to being that best version of yourself. Self-awareness is actually an extremely powerful skill because if you're able to be self-aware, you can self-analyze. And if you aren't self-aware, then you can never reflect on those shortcomings and you're always going to end up in the same place that you started. Like, it's so much better to go through life thinking that there's always something you could have done in each scenario, regardless of whether it was actually your fault or not. For example, right, let's say you were crossing the street and you got hit by some biker even though it was your turn to cross. Now, realistically, right, it's not really your fault, but you gotta think to yourself, like, what could I have done better in that situation to avoid that? Maybe you were on your phone looking down with your headphones on. Maybe your reactions were too slow. Maybe you could have been faster. Or maybe you saw a girl that you liked at the coffee shop, right? Maybe you tried to get her number and her friend came in and cockblocked you. Now, in that situation, yeah, of course you could be like, yeah, of course the whale always comes in and interject when they don't get attention. Even if that was the case, you could think to yourself, maybe you could have incorporated her into the conversation. Maybe you gave up too soon. Maybe your conversation skills weren't good enough for that situation. Whatever it is, right, there's always something that you could have done. Even if it might not have changed the result for that situation, at least you're better equipped next time. At least you sharpen your blades if nothing else. And actually, I'll tell you guys this, right, the most significant interactions with women and girls throughout my entire life, the ones that I hold on to and look back on aren't the ones that went in my favor or were the most successful. It wasn't getting a girlfriend or getting out the friend zone or maybe a successful date where she went back to my spot. It was never the situations where I succeeded in getting my objective. The ones that I would always look back on are the most painful experiences, the friend zone, the breakups, the hard rejections, the heartbreak. And it's not because I'm sadistic, but number one, it's because I knew exactly what went wrong. I knew why things played out the way they did. It was the situations where I had to self-analyze the most, the version of myself in that situation that was inadequate. For example, right, the most significant rejection that I experienced was when I got brutally rejected by my crush in high school. Now, for a lot of guys, right, rejections and these negative experiences with women causes them to never want to deal with them again. That could have been the case for me as well if I didn't use it as a learning experience or, monetize it for a video. But the funniest part about that is that I never even asked her out or made any real advances. That's how brutal that rejection was. Imagine getting rejected without even asking a girl out. Still remember that text word for word. If you've been watching me for a while, you know what situation I'm talking about. And it wasn't that experience that I remember, more so the feeling that I experienced. When you experience a soul-crushing rejection, you feel it in your chest. You don't want to talk to anyone. You don't want to see anyone. You don't have an appetite. Took the most depressing shower, laid in bed in the dark. Regardless of how negative that situation felt at the time, I understand why it played out the way it did. And that was because at the time I was just some awkward Asian kid that wasn't good at anything. Wasn't a great athlete, wasn't good at school, was just, invisible. Like, I might as well have been translucent while she was the stereotypical 4.0 honor roll student where all the other guys had a crush on. And at the time, I was still self-aware enough to be like, yeah, it sucks, yeah, it kind of hurts, but it kind of makes sense at the same time. Like, you got to think to yourself, like, okay, from her perspective, how do you think she views you? Now, perhaps maybe even if I did X, Y, and Z, maybe she still wouldn't have been into me. But at least it was like a wake-up call where you realize that women aren't just going to magically be into you. They're not just going to one day see how great of a person you are deep down inside. And even though it's those situations that make you think to yourself like, damn, I'm really nothing. It's only in those situations where you make the greatest change. It's only when you're at the bottom where you can make the greatest comeback. You know, some guys say that's when you enter your villain arc, but I've never really been a fan of that just because getting revenge is feminine behavior. Like, don't hit the gym and get a six-pack just because in your mind you think that's what's gonna make her jealous or regret her decision. Like, go do it to actually better yourself and your life, and that's when you go on your hero's journey. And if you really think about it, that's when the guy is going the hardest in the gym. You know, that's when you're pushing the most weights, that's when you're sparring the sharpest you've ever been. Like, have you ever seen a guy that's going through heartbreak or rejection when he's in the gym? Like, it's always that guy that's going the hardest. And when it comes to rejection and heartbreak specifically, a lot of guys get angry because in the back of their mind, they expect women to just look their way and see what a great person they are. Even though, you know, maybe you're the awkward guy sitting in the corner trying not to be seen. And then they go and get mad at the charismatic dude that's talking to her that she likes and automatically assumes him to be an asshole. Like, you gotta have the self-awareness to see your own shortcomings. That's really only when you can progress and evolve. And on top of that, right, she did me a favor because now that experience is an unlimited source of motivation. Even now it's like, what, 8 years removed from it, I still hold that experience, that memory, because it gives me motivation. Like, every time I think about it, it gives me that extra spark or fire that I need, and I use that energy whenever I need it. And again, it's not because of her, it's because I remember that version of myself at the time that was fragile, that was easily broken, that was weak, you know, that teenage version of myself. Like, how do I become a version of myself where that's not the case? And it's the same thing with friend zone, you know, same thing going through breakups or heartbreak. Like, there's always something you could do even if it wasn't your fault, because that's what's going to serve you moving forward. It's all about picking the highest ROI move for yourself. And in those situations, realizing that she did you a favor is the best way of looking at it. And again, not in a vengeful, spiteful, vindictive kind of way. Or let's say that it was the case where you are better off without her. You know, maybe she was toxic. Maybe she was a thought. You know, maybe she was starting arguments with you on FaceTime at 2 a.m. when you have work or school the next day. Then in that situation, it's like, good, she did you a favor. Now you can progress from that situation, from something that was negative in your life. Or let's take the worst case scenario. Let's say that she cheated on you. In that situation, you got to be like, good, she did you a favor. Because number one, why be angry when the trash takes itself out? And number two, how do you become a guy that a woman would never cheat on? Or let's say it was the opposite, right? Let's say you were dragging her along and you lost something good. Realize why things turned out the way they did. You know, maybe you could have been a better leader. Maybe you let yourself go. Maybe you got fat. Maybe she stopped respecting you. Ask yourself why she stopped. Did you start lying more? Did you start breaking promises? Are you lacking drive? Are you lacking ambition? Maybe you stopped being consistent. Whatever the situation or case might be, she did you a favor. And also, sometimes things happen in life just because it was supposed to happen that way. Like, no matter how small the reason is, people often say in situations that they regret, oh, I wish I would have done X, Y, and Z. It's kind of like the butterfly effect, right? Which refers to a concept in which even the smallest events, no matter how inconsequential it might seem, could set off a chain of events that becomes something very consequential. Like, for example, you might have never been born if your parents never went to that coffee shop that Saturday morning. You know, maybe someone forgot their keys that morning and your parents never met. Like, even cities might have never been built if settlers didn't walk in a certain direction. So it's like, when you think about that concept, right, you better believe that applies to love, dating, and relationships. Like, whenever there's a negative situation, there's always a natural inclination to want to be spiteful towards that situation or a person, especially when it comes to love, rejection, and heartbreak. Like, whatever the situation might be, the best way to look at it is that she did you a favor. Because when you have this perspective, now you have unlimited motivation, and now you have an opportunity to level up. And if you really think about it, there's not much a guy can really ask for. Anyways, hopefully you guys got some from that. Thank you for listening. I love you. Appreciate you. With that said, make sure you guys stay true. Talk to you guys real soon. Peace.